Do you love indies? Then you may want to stick around for the next hour as we attempt to rank the top 10 indies of all time. My name is Brenden Groom, and I'm the host of the Pass Controller podcast. And joining me on this indie-filled journey is an illustrious cast from around the country. Let's meet the panel. Joining us from IndieObscura, the editor-in-chief, Morgan Shaver. Morgan, how are you doing tonight?
Not bad. Not bad at all.
Keeping this train going, we have Cameron Hawkins, writer at DualShockers, and the current kind of funny Inner Sight champion. Cameron, how are you doing tonight?
Doing all right. I'm ready to talk games.
Ready to talk indies? I'm very curious to see what you go to bat for tonight. It's gonna be a good time.
We'll see.
Also joining us is Jenny Windom, developer at Rose City Games, the queen of cozy games, and recently featured in a Nintendo Indie Direct. That's pretty remarkable. Jenny, how are you doing tonight?
Very, very good. I'm excited to talk indie games.
Yeah, indies need more love, and that's what we're here to do today.
Mm-hmm.
Keeping this going, we have Alex Van Aken, editor, video producer, podcaster, pretty much does everything you can think at OK Beast. Alex, how are you doing tonight?
Hey, I'm doing good. Thanks so much for having me on the panel. I'm excited.
Yeah, this is a great group. I'm very excited. And rounding us out is one of my co-hosts, the former Overwatch fiend, Todd Garry. Todd, how are you doing tonight?
I'm good. I'm doing well. I'm excited to dive in.
Yeah, I mean, you're wearing a Cuphead shirt, so I feel like I already have someone on my side fighting for a game I'm interested in. So yeah, right. I'm very excited. So a little bit of the nitty-gritty of how we're going to run things tonight. We each picked 3 games ahead of time, which is going to get to us in a list of 18 games. And between that 18, we're going to all come together and figure out how we can narrow this impossible task of making a top 10 list of the best indie games of all time. So to kick things off, we're going to start with Alex. Alex, if you want to take a moment to fight for your first 3 indie games.
Sure. Well, my first pick is going to be Celeste by Matt Makes Games. It's for those who aren't aware, it's a 2D platformer that is really fun. It came out in, I think, 2018. Features a character named Madeline, and you are kind of platforming through this like dream-esque mountaintop that's full of, different environments and different buildings, and you're kind of platforming, making your way to the top of the summit. And along the way, the game, surprisingly, when I first played it, I wasn't really expecting this, but it kind of dives pretty deep into some, mental health discussions. And I just found that when I played this game, I was going through, some hardships, and it just came at the right time and kind of spoke to me and was a touching story, and honestly just a really fun gameplay experience. And so Celeste, it's also got an incredible soundtrack by Lena Raine. It's phenomenal. There's also a great remix soundtrack. So all in all, just a really fun game. And I'm happy to include it on this list. My second pick is one that I'm sure many people are familiar with, Undertale. Developed by Toby Fox and friends. It's the RPG that got famous for allowing you to not kill enemies and to progress through the entire game via a pacifist run, and it's full of really fun characters. And I'm actually like not one of those people that like sometimes like video game stories kind of just bounce off of me. Unfortunately, I think it's just like a when you're just reading text on screen, sometimes it doesn't always land. But for me, Undertale was one of those games that just, it was so relatable. It was so funny. The characters, are honestly all over the place and are written in a very, I don't know, like a meme format. Like there's a lot of like internet culture in this game. And so I'm curious how that'll age like 10 years down the line. But having played it, I played it in 2017, I think. A few years after it released, and quickly became one of my favorite games. Also, banger soundtrack as well. And then lastly, my third pick is a walking simulator. It was actually, it's my favorite walking sim. It's Firewatch, developed by Campo Santo. I love the story between the main characters, Henry and Delilah. Henry kind of goes out into the wilderness and becomes joins the Firewatch and is on the lookout for fires and develops a relationship with this other character named Delilah along the way. And it's just a very cinematic story that was presented gorgeously with beautiful artwork. And so Firewatch is easily one of my favorite games and one of my favorite indies of all time. So that's why I included it on this list. And those are my 3 picks.
There's definitely a trend of banger music in your picks.
Yeah, exactly. I know. Firewatch too, man. Banger music, acoustic guitars. Oof, so good.
you gotta have it. So Cam, what are your 3 picks to add to this list of 18?
So my first pick is Limbo. Limbo is one of my favorite games of all time. The ending made me cry, and it literally has no dialogue throughout the entire game, and it's a very gloomy game, as you can tell by the title. And I think that achieving that for me was just a huge speaks volumes. And I think that it is masterful in the sound design. Like, there are little secrets in the game where you have to rely on the sound design to pass certain levels or certain sections of the game, because it's literally just completely dark, so you can't see your character, which I think is really, really cool level design and sound design. I think just artistically, it is beautiful, with it being all in whites, blacks, and grays. I think it's just, I just can't think of any flaws with this game. I think it's as perfect to a video game as it can be. And yeah, I think it's great. My second game is Castle Crashers. I think,
Yes.
yeah, on the 360, that was like, I put so many hours into Castle Crashers. I replayed that game countless times. It's so replayable. It's endlessly fun. There's so much content in that game. It's just a great, one, in my opinion, probably the best like multiplayer indie there is. Bringing back that arcade feel that you like, from like the TMNT, like those type of experiences. And I don't think really any other game like it has surpassed that since its release. And then the third game, it's honestly like not one of my favorite games, but I think it should be in the discussion, which is why I brought it to the table. And that's The Binding of Isaac. I think that, since indies have become more popular again, we've seen a lot of roguelike titles like Dead Cells, which is personally my favorite. But I think that The Binding of Isaac is just the best. I think that it's just brutally hard, but it's never like, I never feel like it's my, like, I always know it's something that I got to learn and get better at, and like it doesn't hold your hand at all. And I think that as someone who likes to be challenged in video games, I think that is the most attractive thing with roguelikes, is when they're just incredibly hard and you just got to figure it out and just adapt and learn. And it's just such a unique game, and again, just tons of content. I think it's great. So those are my 3.
All great picks. Castle Crashers is definitely one of my favorite games of all time, for sure. Jenny, it's your turn. What are your 3?
Oh my goodness. I just have to say, it was like, I would think I was telling you, it was like picking kids. It's the hardest decision I think I've had to make in a long time, is picking my top 3. So my first one was Florence. And this is a really like hopeful and heartfelt game by developer Mountains, and Annapurna Interactive published it. And the premise of this game is about a woman named Florencio who just feels stuck in this mundane loop of everyday life, going to work, coming home, going on social media, and like sleeping, rinse and repeat. But one day she meets this cello player named Krish, and sparks ensue. And this game is just this beautiful love story, but throughout it, it's not a love story perhaps in the way that you think by the end. And I really appreciated that. This game packs so many emotions into a very short time span. I think it was only about 30 minutes to play. And so I found that the shorter time frame actually felt really great, because time-wise it was accessible to consume. It's a game that you can pick up and just really immerse yourself in and feel good about. And I picked this because like the story is so human and poignant, and the art uses color in an incredibly just intelligent way. The soundtrack is just beautiful. And I think it's also really neat that this is an indie that was on mobile first, and the way that the mechanics work and the way that they use touchscreen to convey the repetitive nature of some of these daily actions, it's something that only games can do and only games can immerse you with. And I thought that was really, really beautiful. I also thought it was cool because the team actually intentionally created something that did not involve violence within a game. And I always appreciate when games try to look at different ways that we can engage in a loop and play that's not traditional. So that's why I picked Florence. My second game was one that I didn't initially think of, but the more that I thought about it, the more I was like, I think this should be at least mentioned on the list, and that's the Stanley Parable. Oh gosh, where to start with this? So it's developed and published by Galactic Cafe, and it's another short game. So I guess I'm also just digging indie games that I can actually finish. And so this is another one where it's about a person named Stanley who's stuck in these sort of daily. He's an office worker. He's probably not happy at his job, which is very relatable. And things take a strange turn at the start of the game because all of the coworkers in the office building that Stanley works has disappeared. And so you begin exploring, and as Stanley, explore this office, the narrator starts to really cheekily and snarkily explain and narrate what's happening, and then starts to narrate your decisions and sort of tell you what to do. And as a player, you can choose whether or not to follow those traditional steps that the narrator is telling you or break the mold. And this game is genuinely one of the funniest games I've ever played. Like, I was laughing out loud, and I personally find that humor can be kind of difficult for a lot of games. Very few games, I think, really get funny in the way that the Stanley Parable does. And what I loved is there's just some really thoughtful themes presented about the nature of playing games and what it means to consume and engage with a narrative, and whether or not we choose to break the rules. Like, what does that mean when the game designer has allowed you to break the rules? It gets really meta and really cool. And I think you only really get to see that in indies. Like, indies have the freedom to explore that kind of a discussion. And then my last selection, which this is personally my favorite game of all time, and that's Journey, co-developed by That Game Company and Santa Monica Studio. And I think it's published now on PC and PS4, thanks to Annapurna. And it's a really straightforward game. In Journey, you just play a robed figure who is compelled to move forward toward this mountain and this beam of light. And there's no text, there's just music, and you just kind of intrinsically know that that's your goal. And the way that the game takes you through these ruins and through all of these sort of environments without text, but just through music and imagery it's impeccable. It's like probably one of the greatest works of art, in games for sure, and maybe even outside of games. In its simplicity and clarity, I love how when you play Journey, because it is so almost simple or bare as a game, every time you play, you can kind of go into it and engage with it in a different way. The soundtrack was like Grammy nominated, so another just great soundtrack. And for those of you who haven't played, I don't want to go into it too much, but it changed the way I thought about online and co-op play. Throughout the game, there are other robed figures that you can interact with, and by the end, like, I have never played it and not cried. So yeah, those are my three.
Awesome. Definitely, like, so far already this list is so diverse, and I think just in general, anyone that made their own top 10 is probably going to be nothing like the rest of our lists. But I'm excited because, like, everyone's speaking so passionately about these games, and I'm really excited right now. I love talking about indie games. So Morgan, that brings us to you. What are your 3 picks?
So my first pick was Don't Starve. It's a indie survival game, and it kind of changes the way survival games work in a few different ways. The art style, I think, is probably one of the most memorable aspects of it. It's got this like Tim Burton-esque kind of gothic art style. The way the characters interact, like this, with musical instruments, and I thought that was really cool. When they speak, it's like the sounds of musical instruments. And yeah, it's just a really addicting game to play. It's different every single time, but it's easy to jump in because you just start collecting things, and it doesn't feel as difficult in some ways as some of the other survival games at first. And then it's like, as you play, you're like, oh, everything can kill you. Which I think is also really fun and funny because there's a lot of unexpected elements to it. And as you play and go along, it just gets harder and harder and harder. I haven't made it past winter. I haven't gotten that far. So it's very difficult, and I've put quite a bit of time into it. So I don't know if I just suck at the game or if it's just really hard.
I've never beaten it either.
Yeah. And then they also added the multiplayer element, which I think is fun as well, because you can play with your friends and you can choose either to like help each other or burn everything to the ground. I have some friends who are just like, yeah, let's torch it. So I think that's kind of fun. And then I guess my next pick is kind of a personal one for me, but I think that it's really good and worth mentioning. It's Chivalry, Medieval Warfare. I put an obscene amount of time into that game. And it started as a mod, which I think is really cool because a lot of indie games kind of start that way in some aspects. They like start as a mod, and it has a really great modding community to it as well, where people can do anything. There's like a mod that has like no gravity and you're just flying through the air screaming, and it's just really out there. The multiplayer element to it is kind of interesting as well because the game doesn't encourage you to be chivalrous to other players, but I've noticed that that's something that just naturally happens, where sometimes you'll be going around in like a team deathmatch or just a free-for-all, and you'll just make a friend that you just won't kill for whatever reason. Like, you can't really communicate with them other than the voice prompts. Like, you can scream at them or say no over and over and over again, and the voice acting at the game is really funny. So it's just, it's hard to play it sometimes and not laugh because you'll just see somebody and you'll just run away screaming, and it just becomes like a thing. Another great element to it as well is the intricacy of the swordplay a little bit. When I would play, it was really difficult, and everyone has their different favorite weapon, and it's just really hard to master. And I love the fact that there's like clans and people you can make friends with, and there were like servers where they'll teach you. You know, it's not like a thing that's built into the game. The players just made that. And I just think that's really great. I haven't seen that kind of element to multiplayer games too much, where it's just the players have expanded it on their own. So I think that that's kind of cool. And then my last pick is Life is Strange. That one I really liked the narrative of. I think it took kind of an understandable concept of like high school and friendship, and it kind of elevated it and made it very interesting and different with the time travel mechanic and the rewind, and the characters were just so well written. I found myself really relating to Chloe. I could see a lot of myself when I was in high school in Chloe, and I thought that was kind of, it was nice and refreshing to see that kind of dynamic between Max and Chloe and their friendship. And it's not perfect. There's a lot of things in that game that aren't perfect, and the way that they overcome those things and how heavy some of it hits. Like, there's so many heavy elements to the game that I think that it does it really well. And it's another one that's hard to play without crying for many of the different episodes in the plot. It's just, I don't want to spoil anything, but it's sad. It's sad, but it's good, but it's sad. So I really like that game a lot.
I love it. So it sounds like between all the picks so far, good music and you have to cry, and that's like the benchmark.
Yeah, right.
That's where we're at. So Todd, let's hear your 3 picks.
All right. Well, my first pick is one of my favorite games of all time. It's another Play Dead game. It's Inside. The first time I picked this game up, I just remember you just dropped into this world the same way you are with Limbo. And you don't know what's going on. You're just a boy in a red shirt. The tension, the lighting, the shading, everything in this game is like so amazing. And you are just, it's the same kind of, not to piggyback off of Cam, but it's the same thing where there's no dialogue in this game. And you're just rooting for this boy. You want him to get to where he's going, and there's not like a single word spoken. And the whole time I'm just like, oh, come on, we're going to do this. We're doing this together, you know? And then you get to that, obviously I'm not going to go to spoilers, but you get to those last 10 minutes, and it is one of the most batshit crazy ends to a game I've ever played. And I loved I remember watching it and just being like, what? Oh my God. And then replaying it. There's certain things which obviously I don't want to go into spoilers, but you don't even notice stuff your first playthrough, and then you go through it on your second playthrough, and you're like, wait, oh, what? Oh, and one of the reasons why I love this game so much, I love games that the second I'm done with it, I go to the ends of the internet to find people talking about it, and everyone has a different theory. Everyone has, but they all work. They all seem to work in some weird way. There's no set story. Everyone has, it's great, and I just love stuff that makes me think for days and days after playing it. And that game was absolutely just a game that I couldn't stop thinking about, and it's probably why it's one of my favorite games of all time. Number 2 is probably the second indie I think I ever played, and it was one of those games I saw released on PC, and I'm like, man, I need this game. I need this game right now. And then it finally got announced for Vita. It's Hotline Miami from Dennaton. It was it's another game that just like hit me over the head with like this crazy violence. But the movie Drive came out about a year before this game, I believe. And and that's one of my favorite movies of all time. And I love the soundtrack. Love the soundtrack. So when I started playing Hotline Miami, all of a sudden I'm like, okay, I'm down with this. And like you got the headphones on and you're just like bopping, running around, killing people. It's so bad. But like you're just like, you're like, there's so many different ways to kill people. There's so many things they throw at you. But one of my favorite things about that game is after you kill everyone, everything stops and you're just walking through this building where you massacred everyone quietly. So they kind of want you to reflect on everything you did at the end of every level. Which I always loved about it. But that game, I still play the soundtrack to this day. It's one of my favorite. It's I can put that on at any point, and I'm like, yep, anytime. I'll put it on. But and then my final game is basically the first indie I ever played, and it goes back to my Vita. Again, my Vita was like my indie machine back in the day, and it was Spelunky, and I'd never played a roguelike before, and this game for me, I didn't know what I was doing at first. I was like, wait, okay, it's different this time around. What's going on here? And I'm like, oh, I can't do that. Oh, what's this? Oh, and I kept on just like having to learn the game more and more and more. And it was kind of unlike anything I'd ever played before. And it's kind of funny because I've been going back to it recently. And this just shows you how like this game can surprise you at any point. I bought an axe from a shop, was picking at something. Next thing I know, this thing above it just dropped down and smushed me. And I'm like, oh, okay. I was like, so it's one of those games where like something new, it feels like it's new every time you play it. And I really appreciate that. And that was like the first, like I said, style of rogue type game that I was like, oh, okay, I'm down with this. But yeah, that's my 3.
I will say, I won't go off on too big of a tangent, but Todd and I have had many discussions where he says the Vita is better than the 3DS, and I like hard disagree with that.
I think everyone disagrees with me.
He always brings up that it's the indie machine for him and Spelunky and Hotline Miami and all these other things. And I'm like, my indie heart has a hard time fighting against him on that. But the 3DS is a better library. I'm sorry. Anyways, so I will now add my 3 picks to this list of 18. And all 3 of these games are something that are very, very special to me. I'll start with Shovel Knight, which I personally think that it's probably the best indie game ever made for a lot of reasons. But for me, Shovel Knight came at a time where there wasn't there are so many games like Shovel Knight now, whether it's the art style or it's, traditional platformer that's harkens back to like the 8-bit era, 16-bit era. But there was a time where that wasn't the thing that everyone was pumping out. And Shovel Knight was kind of, towards the beginning, if not the beginning of that, at least in a mainstream way. And I think that, over the course of that, I mean, that game technically has a bunch of DLC that's still considered like the main game. But even if you just take Shovel Knight Treasure Trove, which is the original game, the Shovel of Hope, which is the original game, I think that game itself, without the expansions, which are all great in their own right, is such a benchmark for not only platformers, but just indie games in general. I think that when you're looking at platforming games in particular, one of the most important things is tight controls. And if the jumping doesn't feel right, if it feels slippery, if the platforming doesn't feel pixel perfect, I feel like that can really make or break a platforming experience. And I feel like Shovel Knight executes both on gameplay, on art style. It has incredible music by Jake Kaufman. I love Shovel Knight. So that is my first pick. My second pick is another game that I have a long history with, which is Cuphead. And Cuphead is one of those things that when I saw Cuphead get revealed, it was immediately like, this is something I need to play as soon as possible. And it got delayed for so long. And I remember it must have been like PAX East 2016, maybe, or maybe that's too early, 2017. And it was like the first demo that was available to play anywhere that I could go, that I was at. And I remember playing the game. It was at the Microsoft booth and playing the game over and over and over again. And just like, it was actually way more difficult than it was in the final release. The early beta was more difficult, but it was just so punishing. And one of the developers was from Studio MDHR, was standing there, and we were just like talking, and it was just everything about that moment then to when that game finally came out. Myself, the other people in Pass the Controller, all of us got to my house the day that it came out, and we all sat down and took turns playing co-op together. And it had such a special place in my heart for all of those reasons. But aside from all the personal stuff, I think that, again, just it's very, very impressive what they did with that art style, where it's all hand drawn. And it is, I think there's like nothing else as gorgeous as that game that I've ever seen. It's literally, a playable cartoon. It's a cartoon in motion. And if you dig deeper into the history and the story of Studio MDHR and what those people had to do, where, they mortgaged their house, they did all these things, which is a story that probably is not too far from other indies, which is why I love indies. But there's just so much love and passion into that game. And for me, it stands out. And that music is so good, for like how Todd can play the Hotline Miami soundtrack all the time, like the Cuphead soundtrack, that is always finding its way into my rotation. And yeah, I love Cuphead. And then my final game, which this is like my personal pick, I really hope it makes the top 10. I don't feel confident it will make the top 10, but it is The Messenger. So for me, The Messenger is, I would say that Shovel Knight was the benchmark for indie platforming games. And I still think that Shovel Knight is a benchmark, but I feel like The Messenger is the closest, if not the best, comparison to an indie platformer that I think executes completely on a gameplay standpoint. I think that it nails what it's doing with the art style, which is 8-bit, 16-bit. They do a little. I don't want to go into too much spoilering, but there is a twist that happens later in the game. There's a switch between 8-bit graphic style and 16-bit graphic style, and there's a story reason as to why that happens. And I was not like, I was expecting to love this game when I had the chance to play it with Thierry Boulanger, who's the creator at Sabotage Studio. But when I got to play it for my at home with the review copy and play the whole game at once, and knowing ahead of time that I knew there was this stuff because we had talked about it, even when it happened in the game, it was still so impactful to me that I think that's like good storytelling and good something that's very hard to achieve, I think, for things, especially if in advance certain plot twists or elements that are going to come about. So for me, that is just it was my game of the year in 2018 when it came out. I love that game, and it definitely is one of my favorite indie games of all time. So
awesome.
Now that we have gone through our 3 picks each,
this is going to be hard. I just want to
say it's going to be very hard.
Yeah.
It's going to be very hard. So we have gone through our 18 picks. We have 18 delicious indie games ahead of us. Now the hard part is basically telling 8 of them they're not good enough. They're not good enough for the top.
Before we get started, I just want to say we're talking about the top 18 indie games. Well, we're talking about the top 10, but these 18 are clearly incredible, regardless of where they end up on the list.
Absolutely.
So.
For sure. And it was, I'm sure we all have, I saw some of your other lists of things that we, had to leave off, unfortunately, but
I think like 8.
Yeah, there's so many other games that, could very easily, given a different day, different conversation, be on this list. So, take this for what it is. It's our top 10 at this moment. It could change tomorrow if we had the same conversation. Who knows?
It's true.
Mm-hmm.
So who wants to do the honors of taking a game and putting it on this list first?
Put it on the list.
I mean, how do we want to start deciding what makes the top 10?
We'll say, like, just from observation, out of all the games that were said, I think the most agreeance that we got, like, head nods and things like that, was when I said Castle Crashers. I'm just saying. I'm not saying that to say, like, hey, my game should go on the list. But I saw, like, everyone being like, yes, Castle Crashers is awesome. So I'm just saying that, like, you know, I would put it in the top 10.
It would be on the list for me.
A lot of
It
people
would be on the
agree.
list for me
Yeah,
too.
I would definitely put it up there. So
That's
I will
majority
put
right
that.
there.
I will put that on there for now. Where it stays on the list, who knows? It's sitting pretty at number 1 for now.
Okay. And then
can the behemoth keep it up?
All right, I'm gonna start hurting some feelings. I'm so sorry.
I love take the initiative. Just start
Yeah,
getting
no,
everyone
I'm
done.
gonna start. I'm
Going for it.
gonna start pulling heartstrings. I'm so sorry. So, Brenden, I love you, but the messenger's
no.
not top 10. I'm sorry.
I had to go to bat for one of my favorite games.
I knew you were going to say it, but I was just like, I'm gonna have to let you down quickly.
I wish I could chime in. I haven't played it.
Because the thing is with the messenger
so
is
good.
that there are games, not that I wouldn't say are comparable, but I feel like there are games that have recently came out around the same span as same time frame as the messenger, that I feel like are more talked about and more like, you need to play this, you need to play this game, like you need to play Dead Cells, you need to play Hollow Knight, you need to play things like that
in 2018, Celeste, Dead Cells, Hollow Knight, and The Messenger all came out. And no one talks about The Messenger, which is why I have to bring it up today, because I love that game and it doesn't get the praise it deserves. It sold very well. It did very well. They're making a prequel that's also an RPG called Sea of Stars. Fantastic looking game.
Yeah.
But I have to go to bat for one of my favorite games. But I understand it. I can take that. I'll take it.
Yeah. And we're not like, and again, we understand like all these are good games. Like none of these games are bad.
Yeah.
It's just like top 10. We gotta make some cuts here. And for me, I think like the easiest cut right now that I see, that I've played a little bit of, is The Messenger. So that's.
Are there any that we can hold hands on and say yes?
I'm with Cam on The Messenger though, because I thought it was
Todd,
alright.
go away.
Sorry.
Get out of here.
I was trying to change the topic for you.
I know.
It's not a bad game. It's not a bad game.
Can at least 4 of us hold hands on Undertale?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Okay. That's on the list. There's 2.
I would probably put Undertale above Castle Crashers as well.
We're not going to rank them yet. We're not ranking them yet.
Oh.
We're not ranking them yet.
Okay.
No, we don't have
You got to build the suspense.
I think
I would also hold hands on Celeste, I feel like.
No.
Me too.
I'm sorry.
Oh.
I'm sorry.
Alex and I are
cut deep.
holding hands. Anyone else coming for this?
I recognize it's a great game. It just didn't, and I think it does some important messages. It just didn't hit with, like, I played it in full. I played the entire game. I know the entire story.
We're not going to be friends after this, Cam.
I think it's a great game.
Our relationship is over.
I don't think it's a top 10 indie. Remember, indies are like 10 years old at this point. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, there's so many games.
Can we keep it on the list for now?
Sure.
Okay.
Just
because you never know. You know,
my own
20 minutes from now, things might be different.
One thing that I really want to point out about Celeste, because Celeste was actually one of my top 3 choices, and then I was so excited that Alex picked Celeste so that I could like free up another space for something else. So for me, Celeste is especially impactful because like for me, it changed the way that I thought about a genre because of all of the accessibility that it has included. And so I think the fact that it allowed people to access a genre that maybe they would have never tried, I think is so powerful for any game. So I definitely want to like not knock it off the list, but definitely keep it there.
Sure.
You know what? I'd like to add something to Celeste and maybe sway some hearts, maybe sway some people here. You know, Celeste came out in 2018. The Messenger came out in 2018. You know, if Jenny and Alex want to go to bat for the Messenger, I could, you know, tick that box for Celeste.
No, get out of here.
Don't make deals. Don't make deals.
It's early. We can make deals.
So I'm going. Okay. I think we can all hold hands on Shovel Knight.
I mean, that's a yes for me, obviously.
I think because No. We got two yeses.
It's not my favorite. I mean, I will say that. I would say 2D platformers
Really?
like, well, Shovel Knight in particular. I'm not going to talk about 2D platformers. Shovel Knight in particular, for some reason, like I respect that game so much, and I know that is beloved. And like me, even just like saying like a butt in here, like everybody's hating me.
Yeah, I'm like kind of shocked right now. Like,
listen, I respect Shovel Knight. I think it's an excellent game. Just didn't necessarily land for me as hard as it did for other people.
Also, it got
I'm just saying,
also,
you can
it was
at
big
him
enough.
at It's Van Aken.
Oh,
and
no.
how very wrong he is.
Shovel Knight was big enough that it got amiibos, y'all. It got amiibos.
That's true. That's a good point. Yeah,
huge.
It is the only indie representative that is a assist trophy in Super Smash Brothers.
Yeah, like Shovel Knight was the one character that I like legitimately thought could be a Smash character when
should have been in Smash.
Like the one indie character that I can think of. Like this makes sense.
I agree with you.
I think Shovel Knight is a like I don't know, but like
I'm not saying it's not top 10. I'm just not like number one.
We'll move on.
I think we could put it in the top.
No,
10
I think we can leave it in there for now. We can leave it in there for now. Let's do
it. I'll say this: like, if I'm making like the pillar of indie games, like not even the top 10, like pillars of indies, Shovel Knight is like a hole on that building for me.
I agree,
hands down. I do like how our method of getting to this top 10 is holding hands. Yeah. I want to acknowledge how great that is.
It's just majority. Like, can a majority of people say that this would be on top 10? Okay, so here's where things are going to get dicey as well. Let's talk about Journey for a second.
Oh my god!
So I played Journey. I played Journey when it was like it came out free for PS4, PlayStation Plus, and I'm not a big PlayStation guy. Like I didn't have a PS3 for most of the PS3 era, so I didn't really play Journey when it came out, and that might be the reason why it didn't really connect with me. Because Jenny was talking about like basically you can run into other players in the game while you're playing. I did not have that experience. I didn't, and I think that even though probably at the time it was an amazing experience as a game, but knowing that is like a really attractive feature about that game that is no longer really a thing, kind of, in my opinion, hurts the quality of the game over time and just the amount of replayability. I'm not saying that that's the entire Journey experience, but that was like, because I remember I played through the entirety of the game and I didn't know that was a feature when I played through it, and until after I beat the game and someone brought it up like on Twitter, and I was like, wait, you can run into other people in the game? Like I didn't even know that was a thing. I don't know. So for me, I just feel like even though I think the music is incredible, I think the art style is gorgeous. I just think that because of that being kind of a Journey feels very much to me like at the time this was phenomenal, but like if you replayed it now, I don't know if it would fully be the same experience. Does that make sense?
Can I make an argument for Journey without other players? So the first time I played Journey, I also did not encounter other players. And for me, it was more impactful for me to play alone than when I encountered other players when I played it again on PC and it kind of got a small resurgence of new players. I think that the solitary journey makes it a little bit more intimate and it makes it more, I don't want to say sad, but you feel that kind of loneliness as you are alone and the world is kind of dead around you. And I think that still works, at least for me. I definitely felt it, especially with the music. I think the music is one of the things that really hammers it home because there's no dialogue, but you still get the sense, even without other players, even when you're playing alone, of what the game is about and the replayability of it. I mean, yeah, I think with players, without players, I think that there's a lot of great elements to Journey that I would go to bat for it solo or with other players.
Mm-hmm. I also love its like use of color, and how like the entire, the majority of the game isn't steeped in like these warm like reds and oranges, and then you make that final ascent, and like there's just such a dramatic shift visually that like sparks something. I don't know.
No, yeah, for sure. I just think that like I completely agree. Like I definitely finished the game. I was like, that was a good game. That was a very good game. I just didn't like when people like when IGN gave a game of the year. I was like, I did not understand that. I was just like, okay, and I still don't. But I just think that when I'm thinking top 10, it just doesn't come to mind. I expected someone to bring it up, but for me personally. So we can leave that.
I never hear anyone talking about Journey anymore, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but I feel like we talk about indies quite a bit. Maybe it's just because it's been a long time, but I don't know. In my circle of friends, I never hear people talking about that game.
Yeah,
I have never played Journey, so I have to hold my head in shame and step away from this unfortunate conversation. I do like that Cam is like completely owning and assuming the role of villain on this podcast.
Oh, I've got one coming up.
Do it. I'm used to it.
I have one too, right?
How much time do we have left, Brennan?
We are about 18 minutes.
18.
Okay.
Oh my gosh.
Dang.
Okay.
Oh my gosh.
Can we all hold hands? Can at least 4 of us hold hands on Limbo? Top 10.
I think if we're going between Limbo and Inside, I would have to lean toward Inside.
Me too.
No.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
I love
Todd is so
I love
happy right now.
Limbo.
No.
Yeah.
They're both really good games, but I think
Limbo-
what Inside does is take what Limbo has set up for the studio, and they have markedly improved on like gameplay aspects, on foreshadowing, on the
I agree on
nuance, on the story. They did what they did in Limbo and then some in Inside. So I think I'd have to go with Inside for that.
Okay. Here are my arguments against Inside. I love Inside. I love
18
Inside.
minutes. 18
Yeah, really
minutes.
quick. Just really quick. Hear me out. Like so people say that like Braid is the game that brought back indies, right? Limbo was the game that set like concrete, like, and indies are back, they're important. This is what games can be at a small level. And like I remember when Limbo came out, everyone was playing it. It came to like all the systems. It was on phones. It was on tablets. It was everywhere. And I would see people come out and play it. Like people that I didn't even know, like people that didn't even game, that I saw playing Limbo. And and then with Inside, my issues with Inside, I don't think it's I wasn't a big fan of the water sections. I thought that those were meh, and I did not like the ending. Even though it was up to speculation and stuff like that.
I love it.
It was just I don't know, and I'm comparing the two because they're both Playdead. Like I felt an impact with Limbo's ending, while Inside was just kind of like it just kind of fell flat for me.
For the endings, like I agree, Limbo's ending's incredible. Inside is for games that rely so heavily on animation and the character's body language to tell the story. The ending of Inside takes that concept, for me at least, to the nth degree, and it is so absurd and so unlike anything else you see in the rest of the game. It just like strikes you and just like I don't know. It left a lasting impression on me. So I love Limbo too, but Inside would be my pick.
Heart. Oh my god. Okay. Okay. I mean, at the very least, put Inside on the list. I mean, it's in my personal top 10 of these games.
It's there. It's on the list.
I am so hurt right now. Okay. Anyway.
I wasn't expecting that, to be honest with you.
Yeah, that hurt my soul.
Does anyone want to propose a hand holding on anything?
Cuphead?
Cuphead, yeah, that's a good one.
I would obviously go to bat here for Cuphead.
I have one that someone's gonna hate me, but I mean
Cuphead just snuck in with no issues. Put that on the list.
Yes,
I can put that on the list.
Yes.
Cuphead's on the list.
I'll go ahead, Todd. You were.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, don't kill me. Firewatch. For me, that game just. So
yeah,
it wasn't the story. It was. I just felt like. For me, when I played it, it was kind of it didn't perform as well. Like the game itself was very like I had issues with that, but that's not like what bothered me the most. I think like the story was really good. It started off really great, and I get it's all about like normal characters, but the ending, I don't think the ending did anything for me. And
you're wanting something bigger.
Not necessarily
they kind of like
that's,
build it up like it's gonna be this huge conspiracy.
But I get what they're doing. I get that it's not about it's more realistic, that it's not something bigger, and it's more about like these characters and everything. And I was really into them at first, but I got to a halfway point and I'm just like roaming through the woods and I'm just like, where am I going right now? And I'm not talking on I don't know, it just kind of lost me halfway through, but I finished it, but I was expecting maybe a bigger payoff at the end, but I don't think it's necessary. But that's like one that,
and I can totally respect that. Like, I think one of the reasons like I like that game so much is Henry and his wife are like from a place called Boulder, Colorado, which is where I live. So I have that extra
Oh,
emotional
yeah,
touch point. I'm like,
Yep.
they talk about like Pearl Street in the intro or whatever. I'm like,
Oh yeah.
I've been there.
yeah. And so it gets bonus points for that, and you feel like more a little more I think it's an added touch point, you know what I mean? That
No, absolutely.
And I did, and to speak to the ending, I won't like go too deep into spoilers, but I enjoyed the humanness of it. And I know there's like a couple different choices, but they all kind of boil down to the same thing. And yeah, I just like that it was things didn't pan out like I wanted them to, and sometimes that's how life works. And you know, people part ways, even when you know it's sad, and that kind of was just like a poignant ending for me. But I'm looking at the rest of this list. I'm happy to say, you know, Firewatch made it into the top 18, top 15.
Well, are we? Did we? I know Todd and Cam were against Firewatch. Is there a third
I'm against Firewatch.
against Firewatch making the top 10? Jenny, Morgan?
I'll
I don't know
be
if you have any-
against it. Sorry, I loved Firewatch, but I'm gonna say let's knock it out.
And just to speak through, okay. Even though you guys are saying like, oh, Inside over Limbo, that's fine. Who's to say we can't have both games on there? Who said to say?
I don't disagree. I mean, I don't disagree with that.
We can revisit it. Listen, we can revisit it at the end when we figure out if Celeste is going to make the list or not.
Sure.
I would like to propose a handholding on something.
Okay.
And that would be Florence, because of all of these games that are here, Florence is probably the one that has given me the biggest emotional experience. Where I played Florence, I downloaded it on a whim. I heard it was good. It was on mobile. I never play games on my phone usually, and I downloaded it in bed one night, and I went
to bed crying.
Yes, I went to bed weeping. Like I laid awake in bed, and I just like stared at the ceiling, and I was like,
"Hello, darkness, my old."
So hard. It's just it is a fantastic representation of a relationship. Like it is.
Yeah.
It might be the best representation of relationship I've ever played in a video game. Like it is so well done. And to echo some of the things that Jenny said earlier, it's just like the things that the game makes you do. Like the gameplay isn't necessarily like this crazy, you know, groundbreaking gameplay, but the stuff that it makes you do and how it changes as the course of the story goes along is very, very interesting and really not done in other games that I've seen. So I would say Florence should be on here. I don't know.
I agree.
I agree.
I guess
I've never played it, so you got 3, so you're good.
No, we need 4. You need 4.
Oh, 4?
Put it on the list.
Put it on.
All
Put it on.
right.
I love it.
So we have 6 on the list now, right?
We are currently we're at 7 because Celeste is on the list.
What? Did we get a 4?
We put it there for now. We put it there for now. We said we'd revisit it at the end.
Okay,
Yes.
Okay.
I'm gonna make sure it stays.
Okay. Can we hold hands on Hotline Miami? I'm backing Hotline Miami.
I haven't played it, so I can't vote.
That game for me too, and I mean that's the game I picked. But that game I think was a huge kick in the ass for indies as well. That was one of the earlier games that was like, and I don't think that should be the reason why it gets picked, but that game's just so freaking cool. And you go back and play it, and it's so fun. And
I just feel like Hotline Miami is definitely like one of those games where it's like, you know, I feel like with indies nowadays, especially, people are more attuned to like indies that have like a really good story or something like that, like story related video games just in general. But Hotline Miami, I just feel like in general is one of the titles where people just like, when it comes to indies, like you have to play Hotline Miami. You have to. And I just feel like with some of these other games that are on the list that some that we haven't brought up yet, that's not the case. Just through my own experience.
Hotline gets a fringe vote for me. I can see it sneaking onto the bottom of the list. I do love Hotline Miami, but I'm not necessarily 100% sold on it as a top 10, but I do love that game.
Okay. Yeah.
So the things we have left that we haven't debated on are The Binding of Isaac, Spelunky, Don't Starve, Chivalry, Life is Strange, and that I think that's everything. Those are the games we have not deliberated
Stanley
on.
Parable. We have not.
Stanley Parable as well. I apologize. Yes.
How much time we have left?
We
Not a lot.
have about 9 minutes.
Oh my God. Okay. So I'm going to say two things really quick. Again, I'm not trying to attack anyone or their opinions. I've heard of Don't Starve. I just haven't played it. And Chivalry, I have not played either. So I really just can't say much about those two games.
I haven't played Chivalry either, but I'd love to. It looks awesome.
This is what I'll say about Chivalry. Or go ahead, Morgan.
Well,
I was gonna say that of the three that I picked, I would be fine with leaving Don't Starve and Chivalry off, but I would not be fine with leaving Life is Strange off, just because of the narrative choices and the legacy for Don't Nod and how they've continued to build on that. But that's just me.
Okay.
As someone who has not played Chivalry, I do want to say, hearing you talk about how, without the game pushing players to be this way, that it has this online community that is very helpful and guides people. I feel like not only is that something that's rare in games in general, but it's even rarer, if not something I've never even heard of in an online indie game. So I think that in itself speaks to not only the community, but clearly the game is such a good enough game that there are people that care that much about the game. So I would, again, as someone who has never played Chivalry, that tidbit to me, I think speaks volumes about the game itself and its community.
I played and love Chivalry. I mean, the game has a dedicated yell button. Like it's hilarious.
It's a really good game.
It probably wouldn't be top 10 for me, although, man, I need to play Chivalry after we're done with this podcast because that game is so good. It's probably not top 10 for me though.
Okay.
I'd be okay with that. That's fine.
Okay.
So is Life is Strange making this list? Because Morgan is about to shank some people if it doesn't. So let's talk about Life is Strange.
So I'll talk about Life is Strange. I'm gonna play the bad guy again. I've played Life is Strange. I love Life is Strange. I really do. I have issues with it, but I think it has so many incredible moments. But just thinking from top 10 indie games perspective, I just don't think it makes the list. I think some of the dialogue is really corny. I think that the characters are well written, but just the actual dialogue does, like, sometimes it's just really cringy. I had my fiance play through it the first time like a few months ago, and I don't know. But again, I think there's so many incredible moments in that game, both narratively and just like hitting reality in the face. And I think it does that very, very well. But I just think as a game, I don't know. I don't.
Does anyone else want to step in here?
I feel terrible
for Life is Strange.
I haven't played it.
Oh, you should. It's great.
I had it spoiled. I had it spoiled. That's why
it's great, but it's just not top 10. That's what I'm saying.
But it's a game.
I think I might have to agree with Cam on this one, which I am so sorry.
I feel so bad.
I really enjoy Life is Strange, but I think looking at some of the other titles on the list, contextually, I don't think it would make top 10 just among this group of games for me.
That's terrible.
You guys are horrible people.
I know. Yeah. I feel so bad.
This went from hand-holding to backstabbing.
I know, I'm so sorry.
Oh. So looking at the clock and looking at the fact that we have 2, potentially 3 spots to fill, what is going to round out a 10?
Did anyone play Spelunky? Did we even bring it up?
I've heard great things about Spelunky, enough to be like, I would be okay with it being on the top 10, because again, I've just heard from word of mouth alone enough good things about it that I would be down to backing it for top 10. But
I think I would put Spelunky over Binding of Isaac, I think.
Same.
I wouldn't do that, but
I would put Spelunky over Binding of Isaac. For me.
Just give me if you guys give me Limbo, I'll just be like, y'all, finish the rest of the list and I'm good. Like,
what do we have on the list right now, Brenden?
So the current list is in no specific order. Undertale, Castle Crashers, Shovel Knight, Celeste, Inside, Cuphead, Florence, Hotline Miami. That leaves 2 spots. I know Celeste was a potential fringe knockoff, but I think just based on what we've discussed already, I think Celeste is probably going to stay. So that leaves us with 2 spots to figure out in a few minutes.
And we're talking Spelunky, Binding of Isaac, based on like response. Don't Starve, Limbo, maybe not. Stanley Parable.
Yeah, Journey and The Messenger, but I think we cut off The Messenger.
Yes, and I'll
Journey,
allow that.
Like, yeah, Journey. I like, again, I'm just going off my experience, like, but I'm sure, like, I can't speak for anyone else on that, just because my experience was different. But I still think out of this list that we went over, that Limbo is the strongest contender. That isn't a lock yet. I'm just saying.
I would be remiss if I didn't go to bat for Stanley Parable one more time, just because I was the one that brought it up. I think one thing that really is going for Stanley Parable among this list and as a top 10 all-time indie great is that I don't think any other, like, this game could not have happened in any other space than an indie space. And I think the fact that it really forces the player to think about what it even means to play a game is just, again, it's something that doesn't happen outside of indies, and the game design for that is so masterful. So I just wanted to put that out there again.
I think I would go to bat for Stanley Parable. I mean, it directly inspired Gone Home, Firewatch, Everybody's Gone to the Rapture, like countless games that kind of help revitalize the walking, the narrative based, walking sim, as we know it today. I feel like Stanley Parable was 2011 was that first
somewhere
one
around there.
That kickstarted that.
If we're going
hilarious.
If we're going that
I know
route,
what you're gonna say, Cam.
If we're going that route, no indie games would be here without Limbo. None.
That
Zero.
is not true.
That's not true.
That's not true. I'm over exaggerating. But you know what I mean? It concreted. It did. That's Limbo. Oh, okay.
I'm putting the motion Stanley Parable because I'm
on board with that.
Some walking sim representation.
I've heard good enough things about Stanley Parable that I'm cool with it.
Same.
I actually looked up some top indie lists just to see if I forget anything. And on I think the main list that I looked at, Stanley Parable was number one.
Yeah, it was on the top of a lot of lists I looked at.
So,
yeah, absolutely.
So we're at the 2-minute mark. So we need this 10th game.
Okay, all right.
Limbo.
I'm saying Spelunky.
Limbo.
That's my.
I'm saying Limbo.
Spelunky.
I'm saying Limbo.
Jenny, what are you saying?
Oh gosh, wait, what are we even saying in between? Is it between Spelunky
whatever you want to
and...
say for the final one, and whoever has the most votes,
I mean,
we're
you
gonna
got
lock
Journey.
it in.
I mean, I want Journey, but that's that's me being. It's personal. It's just such a. I think it's such a masterful game. So.
I still think it's great. I just think Limbo's better.
Morgan?
That's very okay.
Of those, I would vote for Journey.
So Journey has 2, Limbo has 1, Spelunky has 1.
I think it should be Spelunky or Journey. I'd be willing to do Journey.
Todd?
See, I do Spelunky or Limbo.
So that makes me the tying vote.
Oh
yeah.
This is rough. I'm gonna say
Hold
Life
on.
is Strange.
What?
Oh my gosh!
No, you haven't even played it. You said you haven't played it.
Fair enough.
No, hold on. So between the 3 games, Spelunky, Journey, and Limbo, which 2 would you whittle it down to? And then we'll vote. You have to cut one of them off.
We have 40 seconds. So I'm gonna throw my vote to Spelunky. So that puts Spelunky on the top 10.
Is that's not 4?
That's
it was you, Alex, and
me,
Todd.
and Todd. But Journey has 2.
I'm okay with that.
Okay.
I could live with that.
Fine, put Spelunky on the list then. Yeah. Okay.
So the top 10 ends up being, in no specific order, Undertale, Castle Crasher, Shovel Knight, Celeste, Inside, Cuphead, Florence, Hotline Miami, Stanley Parable, and Spelunky. And that is the top 10 best indie games of all time. I wanted to try to leave time for everyone to quickly plug themselves.
Yeah.
Let's just run it around the same order we did so go Alex, Cam, Jenny, Morgan, Todd, me.
I'm Alex Van Aken. I do a lot of cool things over at okbeast.com and youtube.com/okbeast, and check out the OKBeast podcast. Those are all of my plugs.
I'm Cameron Hawkins. I write for DualShockers.com. I've been featured on IGN, Kind of Funny Games Daily, and Inside Gaming. And yeah. And I stream on twitch.tv/thecinephile guy.
Hi, I'm Jenny Windom. I'm the communications manager for Rose City Games. You can find us at Rose City Games. And I also stream indie games at twitch.tv/Kimchika.
Hi, I'm Morgan Shaver. I do a little bit of everything. I'm the editor-in-chief of IndieObscura. I work with Greenland content, writing for sites like All Gamers and Prima, and then I do the social media for Tetris.
And I'm Brenden Groom. I'm the host and editor at Pass the Controller, and you can find all of our stuff at passthecontroller.io on Twitter and on Instagram at passcontroller.